I was actually inspired sort of last month by the HTML element of the month section, in which I then decided I would talk somewhat about HTML and not really cover CSS at all here. Because the thing is, if you go to a JavaScript meetup and say, hey, how about we talk about HTML, they're like, JSX? And none of the actual, the HTML. And they don't know what you're talking about anymore. Unless your elements are capital letters, they just don't care. As long as you don't talk about actual JavaScript. I'm not going to talk about JavaScript, nothing about JavaScript, all HTML. Hopefully 7 things you didn't know about the input element. So my name's Nash. I am a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. Before I do start, can I ask who's heard of Twilio at all before? Quite a few people, that's cool. For those who haven't, Twilio is a platform for communications. That just means it's a bunch of APIs that you can use in your applications to do things like connect or communicate with your users via voice, video, messaging, email, and even fax, because the lawyers and doctors still exist, and that's all they communicate by. If you've built something cool with Twilio, I'd love to hear about it. If you have more questions about what this actually is, I would also love to know, so ask me later. See, the thing is, I chose HTML, I chose the input element because I do actually love HTML. It is that underpinnings that everything that we do is actually built off of. Even if you are doing full JavaScript front-end things, at the end of the day, they're rendering HTML, and that's great. And so, underneath all of that, there is a whole bunch of power. The power of any individual HTML element is incredible. And I also like the fact that, with a bit of JavaScript, we can make our own elements now in custom elements, web components. It's a good thing. But what infused me kind of at the end of last year when I discovered a few things about it was actually just the power of an attribute. And an attribute can change so many of these elements in so many different ways. And the one that can be changed the most, I think, is the input. It's not a surprise we're talking about the input, but even if you just look at the type attribute to input elements, this is 8, 9 different input elements with just a different attribute called type. Like there's normal text, for example, or passwords, which is cool. I like not being able to see what I'm typing. Checkboxes, radio buttons, range sliders, and I am not going to talk about styling any of these because we know it's not possible. The number type, I love this one because you're like, yeah, sure, it's just the same as a text, except it's got the little thing at the bottom. But actually, these all have the same flex, they're just inside a flex container. And the password and the text inputs were just like, yeah, sure, we'll go full width then. And the number was like, nah, not interested. I'm exactly the same, except I'm staying this width. Have you seen the date picker in Firefox recently? That's quite nice. Look at it. Fancy little thing. Woo, 2048. And file input elements, of course, also impossible to style. Love those. And these 2 button ones are buttons, right? But they're still just actually the input. I love that back in the day, they were like, what we're going to need is a button that removes all the work we've done. Reset. Thank you. And then submit. I'm not going to submit this, doesn't go anywhere. But that's just the type. But I'm not even interested in the things you can do with type on the input element, because you probably knew about a few of those at least. These are hopefully 7 things you don't know about input. And I'm going to start with input mode. Actually, let's do a bit of audience participation. Who knows what input mode does? Anybody? Sort of, maybe? Not really. All right, cool. I'm starting with a... Oh, go on. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I definitely know it too, but I don't have to answer.
It's about keyboards. So input mode really works well for things on mobile browsers. In fact, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about really matter on mobiles, which is why I have my phone plugged in to my laptop so I can show you some things. Input modes are about keyboards. Rather specifically about what keyboard you get to bring up when you're in a particular input. And so, oh my goodness, let's have actual Firefox behind there. That's a blog post I'm working on. You're going to enjoy that in a week or so. Where? Oh no, I see. Funnily enough, I need to just put this on Do Not Disturb mode as well because somebody is attacking me on Slack. Sweet. So I thought this was not in full screen mode, but apparently it is, so I couldn't tab between them. There we go. All right, cool. So I have a bunch of different input modes here. We'll start with normal text. I like that one. It's a normal text keyboard. This is no input mode, which is cool. Then there's none. which is great because you get an input, but then you can have no keyboard work for it. Yeah.
Just make it required as well.
You make you never get through.
Down and then like select copy too. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. Oh, right. So I could like write something in one of them. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like this input is not about stopping you inputting things. It's just about not giving you. Go away. Now can't select things apparently. There we go. It's not about not allowing you to input things. It's just about not giving you a keyboard. So one of the things you could do with this, of course, is produce an on-screen keyboard if you, say, hate your users and never want them to actually enter anything. Also, it's worth noting that on some Android browsers, this may well just pop up the basic numeric keyboard. So don't necessarily rely on it to not show a keyboard. It might do. Then there's numeric. Numeric's cool. I like this one because it just shows numbers. And just numbers. I mean, it's got those texts on top of them, but I don't think you can make them happen. But that's cool. Then there's decimal. It adds the dot. Useful. Telephone, which adds a few more things, right? Like pause and wait, which actually just means comma and semicolon, I guess. Email is a good one because you get an at and a dot, which is useful because those are both in emails. And remember, your regular text input does not have an at or a dot, and you have to go find them somewhere. And URL equally has .com, or that is probably localized to your browser, your actual, where your phone thinks it is. And then there's search, which is probably better on Android because according to iOS, the difference between search is this full stop here, because you may want to search for full stops amongst your, I don't know.
Any character in regex.
Yeah, right, there you go. Yes. But like star is still hidden away behind 3 layers of things as well. So
You're specific about how many characters you want.
yes, you can't just have any or none. So those are input modes. That is actually all of them. There was a Latin name. No, that's a different thing. Those are the input modes. They're really useful because if you're on a mobile and you just have to type a number in and you're given the text keyboard, you don't have numbers on that and you have to change the keyboard yourself. If you have an email address or a URL to fill in, finding that at and other things is a pain. So these things exist purely to give us that access. The important thing is this is about keyboards and not the data underneath it. Because some of you might be thinking, I've seen some of those other types, like email and tel are a type that you can add to an input mode. But that kind of type means it's the data, whereas the input mode just means it's the keyboard. And if we're using types to trigger keyboards, instead of input mode to trigger keyboards, then we might have unintended consequences. For example, you might think there's a type number. We saw that one already, and that one actually gives us a terrible keyboard for numbers. It gives us the full keyboard, but with the numbers across the top, which is nice, but it's not that nice little number pad. But also, the form then thinks it's a number. So it would be happy to strip off like leading zeros, for example, which may be important to you. I'll get to why a leading zero will be important later. So that's important. Number 2 is pattern. Who knows what pattern does on an input mode? This is better. There's 2, 3, maybe. What does?
We have chocolates. So we should have
I'll let you divvy out things.
Who wants a chocolate and also knows the answer?
Aaron would really like a chocolate. Just get it right first, though. You can't just put your hand up and say I don't know. That's not how it works.
Let's put regexes in your HTML.
It-
Should have more regexes.
More regexes. It allows you to cause more than one problem now. Yes. It's about validation, right? Patterns are about validation. It allows you to add a regex to your HTML input so that you can then deny people at submitting their form because they didn't submit, did not use your regex. That's not really why I included it, because it's also about keyboards in this case. It turned out that before we'd invented input mode, because it's quite a new attribute as it comes to it, people were using different types to try and trigger different keyboards, and that was incorrect. And so this is an iOS thing, I think, for the most part. I don't normally have an Android device about me, so I don't always test this thing. But iOS made it possible so that if you added a pattern of square bracket 0 to 9 star, which means any digit.
This is what happens when you don't know regular expressions. /d star and you there.
You say that, but it happens to be the fact that you have to use this exact pattern, not /d star. This is not about me, it's about WebKit engineers, I guess. I've tried /d star and it doesn't work, yeah. I won't chocolate for now. It doesn't go with the beer. If you use this exact pattern, iOS will trigger the numeric keyboard for you. The simple one, no, not even a decimal. And it has to be this exact pattern. Yeah, I built a demo for it myself just to check this, and yeah, /d didn't work, and that's what I thought, because I do know regular expressions. But not as well as the browser does. So you get a bonus kind of validation out of this. In fact, HTML validation has its ups and its downs, and its reasons to use and not. But in this particular case, if all you expect is a number inside that field, this is a good thing, and it will trigger the right keyboard for you. So that's what pattern's doing for you. Number 3, read-only. What does read-only do? You can't have more chocolate. It's pretty sweet, this one. It's about not using a keyboard. Again, it's great. So many of these input things are actually denying you the ability to type in fields. Because this is an input with read-only on it, and you can focus it, and you can't do anything about it. And you're like, why isn't that just disabled? Can't focus disabled. But why would you want to focus a thing that you can't do anything with? You can't copy and paste in this either. No, you can't do anything. It's read-only.
So, screen reader just to read it, and that's it. Would it read it? It's disabled.
That's true.
So it goes, when you submit, it goes out with the rest of the crap somewhere.
That is a reason. Exactly. Disabled form input elements will not submit with the form, but read-only ones will. So that's cool. It's actually probably worth considering using that over disabled if the value inside the input is important to you. And there's a second thing, actually, the two pseudo classes, read-only and read-write. This is the only piece of CSS in my talk. We got pseudo classes for this. So you can tell whether something's, so you can, because as you can see, it's not really taken up any extra style. It looks like a regular input element, except you can't do anything with it. But you can style it to say you can't do anything with it as well. And it's read-only, but it will pass the data through. Cool. Capture. Here's what capture does. It has two potential attribute and values. Two values it can take. It does not have to do with events. Ah, yes. I knew I'd get at least one thing that nobody knew. This is not JavaScript.
No, it's not, but yeah. If you're talking events, then you're getting into.
Hold on. My thing's gone offline. Come back online. You're plugged in, and it was... I need this to come back so I can show you the demo, because it's actually quite cool. There it is. Capture is actually about... so it's only useful on file upload fields. And...
Is this the file mask thing? Or it limits the type of files that you can...
Isn't that when you bring up the camera?
It allows you to bring up the camera. Exactly.
I want to chocolate for that.
In fact, yeah. There we go. We got there in the end. Capture has two potential values, either user or environment. And not only does it get you to bring up the camera, it gets you to pick which camera that is. So user, which is this first one up here, is the front-facing camera. Hi. And environment, which is the second one there, is all of you. And I like this because you can actually take a picture, and then the iOS Safari will put a very tiny thumbnail of that picture that you took, and then we can zoom in and be like, yes, it really is MelCSS. But yeah, capture allows you to, and note, you can also see that you cannot just pick an existing file here as well. You have to take a picture or a video. But you are allowed to switch the camera if you want to. Because the thing is, it's just a hint to the operating system to say, hey, we'd like to look at the user with this one, or we'd like to look at the environment. Question?
How is this going to behave for the desktop?
It depends on what cameras you've got.
In my experience, it lets me upload a file.
Yeah, the browser doesn't recognize it, it just ignores it.
So really no cameras, is no clue. File capture.
No, I recently used one with
Yeah, it's just an upload. In desktop, it's going to be an upload, but in mobile, it's a, well, you can't upload, you've got to take a picture.
I hope that doesn't change, because if it does, production is broken.
The fun things you can have are these edge case things. But yeah, capture is there for you to take pictures of people and stuff and things. Or people and environments, depending on what the person wants.
Is the prompt for permission when you just go to the page with prompt, because there's a capture element on that page, or is it when you go to input that field that would say...
There's not a permission thing on it at all. It just pops straight up. Doesn't have a worry about it. The thing is, you don't access in the page. You don't access it until there's a file that has been attached to it.
There's another API.
Nothing's left your phone until you...
Yeah.
Until you press,
Access video streams and things like that doesn't have that permission.
and you have to press use photo, and then it's there. I'm sorry about that.
So if you've got it like that, and you click upload, what's going to happen?
Literally nothing. This is just a plain HTML page, and there's nothing behind that.
Surely you can't upload one of each. Like,
I mean, yeah, you can. Yeah, why not? They're two separate file upload inputs.
yeah, I guess it's what you do with
It's
the file.
the same as any other input type of file. It just happens to be that they've taken the images from the camera directly. So yeah, if you uploaded from there, you just get two file objects arrive at your server. It's just my server's not ready for it, so nothing would happen. Oops, no, that's the camera again. Stop that. Like, it's a static site. There we go. It just there's not an action on the form, I don't think. So it's just a demo. It's just a demo. So that was about the camera. Like I said, it's just a demo. What have I got next? Spell check. This one's fairly obvious. It's but for me, like, including this is not about like turning spell check on. That's kind of the default. It's about turning it off. Yeah, because not everything needs spell checking. It's in fact highly annoying when things get spell checked, like, for example, names and things like that. So I have the demo up here. I was going to use my name, or I was going to show the difference between misspelling my name, and misspelling my name. And one of them complains about it. I mean, it's correct. My name is misspelled, but my name might not have a thing. But then I checked earlier as well, and the building we were in is misspelled regardless. So sorry, Iris, you don't have a spelling. But like company names, people names, anything like that, you don't need a red underline for that kind of thing. So turn spell check off. One thing to know about spell check as an attribute, unlike all those other Boolean HTML attributes, spell check is not a Boolean HTML attribute. It has to be true or false. I guess it could be something else in the future, but right now you can't just put spell check or remove. It's because it's on by default, so you can't remove the attribute to turn it off. So it has to be true or false, and nothing else. Because it's not a Boolean attribute, it's true or false. Don't know. Well, we can ask somebody about that, I guess. Give them a chocolate if they get the right answer. Number 6, auto-capitalize. This one, again, kind of telegraphs it in the name, I think. This one, it auto-capitalizes things. It's amazing. It's about not pressing shift. Because, again, this is very much about making your mobile users happier and happier to type. So we have a bunch of options on this one. Let me just get the page up. Auto-capitalize. There it is. There it is. We can capitalize sentences. Sentences is kind of the default. This is capitals. I like this one because it's how you're supposed to type and you don't have to worry. Then there's words. This is good for names, right? Because your first name and your last name probably should have capitals. I was having some fun with it earlier, in which it is... For some reason, my phone is capitalizing the second letter. And I couldn't work out why. And so I've had to leave it like that. But off is also important. Turning auto-capitalization off is important because emails, for example, don't tend to start with capital letters. In fact, they don't seem to care about capital letters, even though technically they're different. No email actually cares about it. And then there's shouting. You can just have, hello, everyone. Just capital. I love this. This is for online forums, mainly, I don't know, Reddit, Hack and Use. That's the kind of place that you could use this kind of thing very successfully. Or I guess like, on for everything. Turn it on for characters, and then you don't have to use that pesky. Just turn on shouting. It's not actually, the attribute value is not shout, it's characters, but we should petition for a synonym there, I reckon. I genuinely don't know what's going on with this words one. It's very bizarre. It did make me think a little bit like this. I don't normally throw memes into talks, but this one just sung out to me. I have no idea what's happening. And then finally, I've got one more thing, one more input attribute that I think is cool. And I'm going to show you right now. It's Autocomplete. Now, Autocomplete is cool. It's vast, actually. It's my favorite because it does so much stuff. These are all the autocomplete attributes, of values, sorry. Including such favorites as, well, there's not just birthday or B-day, but B-day day, as well as B-day month and B-day year. I highlighted a couple, actually. There's IMPP, IMP. This is useful for both people still using their own XMPP server. It's an instant messaging protocol. Autocomplete, that's useful, that's cool. This one, I had to highlight address line 1, line 2, and line 3, and then address level 4, level 3, level 2, and level 1, because they run opposite. They're actually listed in the correct numerical order in this particular case, in that address line 1 is the first line of your address after street address. Yeah. Address line 1, address line 2, address line 3. Then address level 1 is about administration level. So address level 1 is actually the largest part that's not the country around you, so we'd be Victoria here. Address level 2 would be a city. That's about as far as most countries go. Apparently China has 3 administration levels. I don't know who has 4 administration levels of addresses that also still include a street address on top of that as well. But that's what they're for. They go backwards. I also like that we have CC, CSC, I guess card security number code or something like that, which is not what any credit card company ever calls it, or any other CVV normally, right? Or I don't know. Well, you don't need to know unless you're a developer trying to build this. And there's other fancy things, like you can actually add a label to this as well. So you can say there's a street address, but this is a shipping street address and this is a billing street address. And that can be used to fill in different ones in different places. Useful to label those things. But the ones I was particularly excited about recently, and the ones they basically started me down this journey with these two here. Because actually we have APIs for two-factor authentication and for sending SMS codes and things like that. And so one-time code and new password, or password management, is important to us. And so new password's great. Firstly, if you're on a form where you're trying to change your password and you have to put your old one in and then 2 new ones, if you add new password to the new ones, it doesn't get auto-completed with the old one, which is cool. In fact, in Firefox, it actually suggests your password, which is even better, because random characters are really good. You can remember this one, URBGY, capital K for capital V, capital G, capital K, 7BP7, capital H. That's my password on localhost. No, it's not even localhost, local file. Anyway, that will save that. That's cool. But even better, and to make your users' lives and security even better, I'm just going to move to my final demo on my phone. And then I'm going to bring up, that's that. I'm going to bring up here. Because if you're there waiting for your two-factor authentication code, and you might have seen this if you use it, if you use iOS or whatever, when you get that two-factor authentication code arrive as a text message, it can suggest it and you don't have to copy the number across or change application and things like that. It is a glorious piece of user experience plus security at the same time. And if you have to implement that, use one-time code as an autocomplete value. and iOS will suggest it to you. Interestingly enough, I try not to talk about JavaScript too much, but Google, on the other hand, with Chrome, are trying out a way to actually programmatically access the code as it arrives in your text messaging. It's similar to the SMS receiver API in Android, which allows apps to do that without permissions. All they get's the code, though. You have to mark up the text message particularly, and you only get the code out of it. But it does allow you to extract that code and move the thing on. This is just an autocomplete. The SMS receiver API for Chrome on Android will allow you to instantly submit that as well, speeding that process along even more. So, I did write a bit of a blog post about this one, if you want to go and read up, kind of how to put input mode, pattern, and autocomplete all together to make a much nicer security experience for users with two-factor authentication and with new passwords and with current passwords. Check that out there. I will publish these later as well. And that's it. That's 7 things that some people didn't know about inputs, including definitely one that nobody knew, and I'm very happy about that. As I said, my name's Nash. I work at Twilio. If you have any questions or anything, I'd love to answer that over a beer or whatever. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening. Thank you. I'll take one now. Does anybody have either questions or an attribute on the input that I didn't cover that you think somebody else doesn't know?
And before that, normally at this point I say, I have chocolates, and you get a chocolate if you ask a question, and a question can be, can I have a chocolate? But we've already established that, so questions, anyone, if you've not asked any? Yes?
I was wondering if you had tried me that on an Android phone, if that works the same through Android's native browser or that browser?
I've tried some of them. So like autocomplete one-time code does not work because that's not how Android set that up, which is a shame. If we go through them all, I guess like input modes do for the most part work. Aside from, like I said, like I think it's old like Android web browser rather than Chrome itself will pop a number thing for input mode none. Some weird stuff there. Capture should work the same. Both of the operating systems have done the same kind of work with that kind of stuff. And actually, so user and environment actually map to get user media's media constraints, where you can suggest to a browser that you would like the user. And that actually does work on desktop as well, although there tends to not be a front and back camera on your laptop. So normally you get the same one regardless, but it doesn't throw a file upload, which is good. What are the other things? For the most part, they do work across them, and they are standard. They are part of the HTML standard. Some of the later ones, like capture and what's the other one? Autocapitalize and spell check. Those two are fairly new, and they're sort of HTML living standard things, which everyone's sort of implemented, except they also haven't because there's no point in autocapitalizing on a desktop. Again, when you have a real keyboard, it doesn't matter. So, but yeah, they work across things. But they were built, I think autocapitalize came from iOS in the first place.
First thing you could do with it was turn it off.
Yeah. And now we can shout.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't, as I was re-going through these today, I didn't have my Android device on me to properly check everything. But for the most part, yes.
Question back.
Autocapitalize is that the value that you send back to the JS or whatever, it would capitalize.
So autocapitalize is the attribute name on the element, and your values are, yeah, I didn't cover that particularly well, did I? The values are sentences, which is sort of the default as well. That's capitalized after punctuation, after like a full stop punctuation. Words, which apparently on iOS just straight doesn't work, but it's supposed to do the first letter of each word.
I thought it's like the entire thing, and then you have to do the what's it called, like, JS chain conquer.
No, there's no JavaScript involved in this at all, so it's not a problem. It just doesn't
There's nothing wrong with this at all.
make sense.
iOS Safari needs to have at least one bug.
I'm delighted to be filing a radar on this later, or maybe just tweeting at the WebKit evangelist. That seems more likely, actually.
Better response.
Yeah. Auto capitalize equals off is important, again, yeah, for emails. Every time I have to decapitalize the first letter of my email address, it annoys me. And auto capitalize equals characters is shouty.
If you choose an email type, then you shouldn't have to choose auto-capitalize off anyway.
It doesn't work that way. In fact, if I go back to the input mode ones, oh, that's an email type. I don't have an email type here, but this is email input mode does start capitalized, which is annoying.
Yeah.
I don't think email type, I can't remember. I'll look at it whilst you're talking and tell you afterwards.
All right, we'll wrap it up there.
Cool.
We've gone longer.
Oh, sorry.
Yay. Thank you again, Phil.
Thank you, everybody.